I wasn't supposed to wake up after the second surgery. That's what the doctor quietly told my mother. 2 floors below where I lay unconscious, tubes in my arms, chemo still burning in my blood. Stage 3 ovarian cancer at 24. It wasn't a headline anyone wanted to read. But there I was, a college graduate with student debt, a barely started life, and suddenly, a timeline. And my family, oh God, my family, they did what families do. At first, my mother set up a GoFundMe. My aunt organized a prayer circle. My sister Melanie cried on Instagram in a video that got over 80,000 views. People were kind. Strangers donated. Friends I hadn't spoken to since high school sent food, blankets, handwritten letters. The campaign raised over $73,000 in 2 weeks. That money was supposed to save me, but I only saw about $2,100 of it. When I came back home, from the hospital after my second surgery, I was thinner, quieter, not myself, but fighting for what was left of me. The house looked different, brighter, newer. And that's when I saw it. The second bedroom, my old room, had been painted baby blue, with cloud decals on the ceiling. $900 stroller sat by the window. A voice-controlled crib, diaper-changing station, designer wallpaper with tiny golden stars. I just stood there, silent, shaking. Melanie walked in, rubbing her perfectly round belly, humming Taylor Swift under her breath. Oh, she blinked at me, like I had just materialized from nowhere. Don't be weird. We needed the space. I stared. This was my room. She gave a mock guilty shrug. You weren't using it. That night I asked Mom about the funds. We were sitting in the kitchen. I hadn't eaten much in days. Everything tasted metallic. She was stirring chamomile tea like it was the most complicated task in the world. Most of it went to the house, she said finally. The baby's coming, Harper. You have no idea how expensive it is. And Melanie's alone. Now. James left her when she was 5 months in. I swallowed the rising heat in my chest. The cancer fund, I said calmly, was for treatment. For me. She put the spoon down with a loud clang. You should be grateful you survived. And now you're home, you can rest. What more do you want? More? Maybe. Maybe for someone to have chosen me. Just once. Melanie posted a photo the next day, her smiling with her bump in front of a $4,000 reclining nursery chair, captioned, When family loves you this much, you'll never be alone. I sat in the basement, my new room, concrete floors, no window. Just a mattress and a folded blanket. That post had 200 likes in under an hour. I didn't comment. I just watched. And quietly, I began documenting everything. One night, I overheard Melanie on the phone with a friend. She cries all the time. Now, she laughed. It's so emotionally manipulative. I'm pregnant. And she wants everyone to feel bad for her. Like, grow up. She didn't know I was behind the stairwell, gripping the banister so hard my nails dug into the wood. That night, I took my pain meds with no tears, no emotion, just focus. Something inside me had shifted. This wasn't my home anymore. It was her kingdom. But I wasn't going to be her servant. Not anymore. There's a kind of silence that happens when grief settles into your bones. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It just watches. I stopped begging for answers, stopped asking why. Instead, I started listening and looking. The next morning, I left my phone upstairs on purpose, accidentally plugged in behind the kitchen microwave, a little hidden, still recording. I walked outside for some air. When I came back, I heard Melanie's voice before I even crossed the threshold. She's being dramatic again. Just walked outside like some saint. And Mom says I should be more understanding? Please. The money helped both of us, didn't it? Pause. Laughter. I mean, I'm the one actually bringing life into the world. She just survived. That word. Just like staying alive wasn't enough. Like surviving cancer was a punchline compared to her pregnancy glow. That night, I transferred the audio to my old laptop. I created a new folder, named it Truth. I started combing through every GoFundMe update Mom had posted. All donations will go directly to Harper's treatments and rehabilitation. We are committed to ensuring Harper gets the care she needs. Thank you for helping our baby girl fight this battle. There were receipts, screenshots, donations with notes. Sending. Love from Oregon, and stay strong, Harper. My dad passed from the same cancer. I hope this helps your fight. Please use this for Harper's meds. Every dollar matters. And somewhere between those posts, the home renovation had quietly begun. A contractor's invoice was pinned on the corkboard in the garage. I took a picture of it. $8,401. Nursery conversion. Paint. Fixtures. Closet build-out. Baby-safe refinishing. Paid in full. Guess whose name was at the bottom? Melanie Johnston. Paid using Harper Johnston Recovery Fund. That's what the payment memo said. A week later, Melanie announced a baby shower. No, not just a baby shower. A wellness celebration. Because after everything this family's been through, we need a moment of joy, she declared, standing in front of the gold foil letter balloons she'd already inflated in the dining room. Welcome, baby. No mention of me. No hint of the person who almost died. Just cake samples and Pinterest boards and a gift registry filled with absurdly expensive items. I smiled and nodded when she handed me a clipboard and asked if I'd mind organizing the RSVP list, since you're not really working right now. That clipboard, it went in the second folder I started. Exploitation. The next day, I visited a lawyer, not to sue, not yet. I didn't even know what I was building, but I needed information. Turns out, when you're 24 and sick, no one thinks you'll ask about fund control, digital fundraising fraud, or medical misappropriation. But I did. And the lawyer, a sharp woman named Elise with ink-black glasses and a steady voice, looked me in the eye and said something I never forgot. If they used your name, your story, and your diagnosis to collect money, and didn't use that money on your care, you may have more power than they think. She handed me a pamphlet about digital donation ethics and fraud. I didn't read it that night. I was too busy scrolling through Melanie's social media. She'd built her entire persona on my illness. Posts with hashtags like "Nah Cancer Sister," "Yeah Family First," and even one that read, "I would have traded places with her in a heartbeat." Watching someone you love go through chemo changes you forever. That post had 12,000 shares, and a link to the donation page. I took a screenshot, then another, and another. By the time I reached the end of my second week back home, I had 47 screenshots, 12 voice recordings, contractor invoices, GoFundMe withdrawal report I found printed in Dad's forgotten desk drawer, and a growing fire in my chest that, burned hotter than any chemo ever had. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry in the basement anymore. They wanted to play pretend? Let's play. Because the baby shower was in 10 days. And I had a plan. The morning of the baby shower, the house smelled like vanilla cake and lavender-scented ambition. Melanie was glowing, not from pregnancy, not really, but from adoration. Her college friend group had flown in from 3 different states. The living room was now a pastel explosion of onesies, macarons, a mimosa bar, non-alcoholic of course, but still Instagrammable, and a slideshow of Melanie through the years. I was in it once. A single photo, me bald from chemo, clutching her hand in a hospital bed, captioned. The moment I knew what real strength looked like, people stood and clapped. She fake sniffled and smiled. She was my inspiration during the hardest time of my life. Her hardest time, not mine. I stood at the back of the room. My hair had barely grown back. My cheeks were still sunken. But I held myself straighter than I had in months. The guest list was made up of distant relatives, old church friends, and women who'd met Melanie once at a yoga class and never stopped calling her babe. They all wore soft florals. I wore black. Are you going to smile at all? Mom hissed at me as she passed by, adjusting the ribbon garland by the window. I smiled then. Slowly. Controlled. Oh, don't worry, I whispered. I'm just waiting for my moment. That moment came quicker than anyone expected. Halfway through the gift opening, Melanie squealed over a set of cashmere baby socks. They're like $20 a pair. She laughed. Can you believe it? I stepped forward, softly, calmly, and placed a flat wrapped envelope on the table in front of her. She blinked at it. Then at me. This wasn't on the registry, she said, laughing nervously. Open it, I said. Everyone watched. She peeled the tape, opened the flap, pulled out 3 printed screenshots stapled together. Her smile froze. What is this? The GoFundMe payout summary, I said clearly, loud enough for the room to quiet, showing exactly where the cancer fund money went. Murmurs rippled. She flipped the pages. Her hand started to tremble. And this one, I said, reaching for another paper, is an invoice. The Nursery conversion. $8,400. Paid using donation funds. Mom stood then. Harper, I turned to her. And here's the social media post Melanie wrote, claiming she would have traded places with me. People gasped as I held up my phone and played the audio from last week. Melanie's voice laughing. She just survived. She wants everyone to feel bad for her. I'm pregnant. Like, grow up. Silence. The kind that presses into the walls. Melanie's cheeks flushed deep red. Then pale. This isn't fair, she said. You're ruining— No, I interrupted, my voice unwavering. You ruined it when you stole from the people who believed I mattered. I looked around at the room full of guests. That money was never meant for a nursery. It was meant to keep me alive. Someone in the crowd stood up. An older woman. In a floral dress, her face tight with rage. I donated $200. You used it for a crib? Another voice. I told my entire office to support that fundraiser. For you, Harper. Phones were pulled out. Screenshots taken. Voices rising. Melanie sat frozen, tears finally spilling, but no one moved to comfort her. Not even Mom. I turned and walked away. Not out of the room, just to the side. I wasn't done yet. But the truth was finally no longer mine alone. The crowd had seen it, and they couldn't unsee it now. By that night, the baby shower was no longer a celebration. It was a scandal. The video clip, the one where Melanie joked that she just survived, had been shared by 2 guests who posted it online, furious and stunned. Within hours, the local community groups on Facebook and Instagram lit up with outrage. Did you donate to the Harper Johnston Cancer Fund? Because her sister used it to build a nursery. Anne laughed about it. I didn't post anything, didn't respond to the DMs pouring into my inbox. I just watched. And when Melanie banged on the basement door that night, screaming through tears, I didn't answer. The next morning, Mom wasn't speaking to me. She set the coffee down with a clatter and left the kitchen before I entered. Melanie sat at the table, her face blotchy, her hair in a bun that made her look small. I don't know why you hate me so much, she whispered. I leaned against the counter. I don't hate you. I just finally decided to stop protecting you. You humiliated me, she said, trembling, in front of everyone. I stared at her for a long second. You humiliated yourself. I just held up a mirror. She started crying again. But this time, I didn't feel the usual stab of guilt. I felt lighter. The real turning point came on Monday. I walked into the law office again. Elise was waiting. We received some responses, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside were printed emails from donors, dozens of them, confirming that their contributions were intended explicitly for my cancer treatment. Looked up. Is this enough? She nodded. Yes. If you'd like, we can send a formal letter of intent, a legal claim to recoup the funds, or take this public through civil court. My hand hovered over the folder. For a second, I wondered what people would say if I'd be called cruel, vengeful, spiteful. But then I remembered every night in that cold basement, every lie posted online, every dollar spent on someone else's comfort while I puked into a bucket, too weak to stand. I closed the folder firmly. Do it. 3 days later, the letter was delivered. It stated, in calm legal language, that I was pursuing restitution of funds collected in my name, totaling $64,870, and that public misrepresentation had caused reputational harm, loss of trust, and emotional trauma. Mom read it first. She went pale. You're suing your own family? I looked her in the eye. You stopped being family the moment you chose her nursery over my survival. That night, I moved out. Not with drama or screaming. Just quiet boxes, folded clothes, a few books, and my laptop. The one with the truth folder still intact. My friend Kelsey, the one who drove me to chemo when no one else would, had a spare room. It's not much, she said as we unloaded the car, but it's warm, and the walls aren't baby blue. I laughed for the first time in weeks. A week later, the GoFundMe page disappeared. Deleted. But it was too late. Screenshots were everywhere. My story was being picked up by a podcast that covered online scams and family betrayal. I didn't speak to the press. Not yet. I didn't need to. Because truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs a witness. And finally, the world was watching. The first night in Kelsey's guest room, I cried without shame. Not from sadness. Not even from the betrayal. Just relief. Relief that I was finally somewhere that didn't require me to shrink. The room was small. Sure, just a twin bed, a wobbly bookshelf, a crack in the ceiling that traced down like a lightning scar. But it was mine. No one stood in the hallway listening. No one knocked with passive-aggressive tea. No one called me selfish for remembering what they did. Kelsey left a note on the nightstand that read, "In this house, your story matters. K." By week 2, my story had already left the house. It was on the internet. Not just in whispers now, but in the form of a feature on a mid-tier podcast called Under the Surface. They told stories of online fraud, hidden family betrayals, and manipulative fundraisers. They'd reached out to me twice before I finally answered. Their email read, "You don't have to speak, but your voice could help someone else survive. What you did, that got me." So I agreed. The episode dropped a week later. My voice disguised. My name changed. But the story, intact and real, it hit a nerve online. Thousands of comments. This happened to my cousin. I donated to a cancer fund once. How do I know they used it right? This is why I don't trust family with money. The hashtag, Jaquir Harper deserved better, began to trend, and then something I never expected happened. People started sending me money, not for revenge, not out of pity, just out of recognition. I tried to return most of it. I really did. But one woman messaged me directly. "Please don't send it back. When my sister got sick, nobody helped. I couldn't save her. But maybe this is how I help someone else." So I let it sit. And when the total reached $22,000, I did something bold. I reopened my college application, the same school I deferred from when the diagnosis came in, the one I sat crying outside of while Melanie got her ultrasound inside. I wrote a new essay. I didn't write about cancer. I wrote about silence, about truth, about what happens when people believe you're too weak to fight back, and how wrong they are. And a month later, I got in. Meanwhile, Melanie's life was unraveling. She posted a tearful apology video online, but the comments weren't forgiving. "You stole money from cancer donations. Sit down. That baby deserves better. How do you look your sister in the eye?" I didn't comment, but I watched. She lost her brand deals, got dropped by a mommy influencer group, had to disable comments on all platforms. Mom called me once after that, just once. Her voicemail said, "You've made your point. Can we please just move on?" I didn't answer, because this was never about a point. This was about remembering who I was and who they weren't. I started therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind you're forced into by family guilt. Kelsey drove me to my first session. She waited outside with iced coffee and 2 donuts, just in case it was heavy. It was. I cried. I admitted I still felt guilty, even when I knew I shouldn't. And then the therapist, a calm woman with wild curls and fierce eyes, said something that stuck. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the scene of the crime. I may not have had much left in terms of family, but I had something else now. A sense of clarity. A college acceptance letter. A quiet room where I could rest without being watched. And a growing pile of documentation in a file named Justice. Ongoing. Because Elise was still working behind the scenes. Because the legal process was still moving. Because truth doesn't expire just because the people who lied want it to. The court date was set for mid-April. A civil hearing. Quiet. Procedural, but powerful. Not for prison, not for headlines. Just restitution and recognition. I wasn't asking for everything back. I just wanted the record to reflect the truth. 3 days before the hearing, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text, a physical letter, in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single page. Harper, we don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. Melanie is struggling. The baby's colicky. James is refusing support, and she hasn't left the house in weeks. You're thriving. Can't we just move forward? Do we really have to go to court? Think of the family. Love. Mom, no apology. No ownership. Just guilt, deflection, and a familiar tone. The one that always made me feel selfish for needing air to breathe. I folded the letter, slid it into a folder marked manipulation, and left it at that. But it hit me harder than I expected. The next day I showed the letter to Elise. She read it twice. Then said, "That's not remorse. That's pressure dressed up in a cardigan." I laughed a little, but it felt like swallowing glass. "She's still trying to make this my fault," I murmured. "She always will," Elise said gently. "Because if she admits it's hers, she'd have to sit with what she allowed." Meanwhile, the case gained traction. A local journalist reached out, asking for a quote about digital misappropriation and familial financial abuse. I declined again. Didn't want a microphone, not yet. But part of me was glad people were finally talking about it, because what happened to me wasn't unique. It was just unspoken. The night before court, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake in Kelsey's guest room, staring at the ceiling crack I'd grown weirdly fond of. I listened to the silence, not the silence of being ignored, but the peaceful kind, the kind you earn. I thought about all the things I wouldn't say in that courtroom. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't ask for an apology, because I didn't need one anymore. Court day. Melanie showed up in beige, like she wanted to disappear. Mom was with her, clutching a folder so tightly the edges were bent. I wore navy, sharp, clean, calm. Elise spoke for me most of the time. She outlined the fundraising timeline, the public promises, the misallocated funds, and the refusal to return or even acknowledge misuse. The judge asked a few questions. He looked tired, but fair. When Melanie's lawyer spoke, he painted a picture of family miscommunication and shared hardship. I didn't flinch, because none of that explained the receipts, or the audio, or the 12,000 angry comments. And then something unexpected happened. The judge asked if I wanted to say anything, not required, just if I felt compelled. I stood. I looked at Melanie, then at my mother, and then at the bench. My story was used to collect money, I said quietly. My pain was marketed to strangers. I didn't consent to that. And when I got home from surgery, I didn't find support. I found a nursery. No theatrics, no sobs, just facts. I'm not here to ruin anyone. I'm here to reclaim what was taken, and to make sure no one else gets manipulated the way I was. The judge nodded. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gavel bang, just words. But they were the ones I'd been waiting for. Based on the evidence and testimony, I rule in favor of the plaintiff. A restitution amount of $52,000 shall be paid within 90 days. Melanie covered her face. Mom whispered something into her shoulder. I didn't wait for a reaction. I thanked the judge, walked out, and exhaled so deeply I felt my ribs loosen. Outside, the courthouse, the air smelled like spring. Kelsey was waiting with iced coffee again. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name, written carefully, like whoever penned it was afraid the letters might shatter if pressed too hard. I almost didn't open it. But something about the way it was sealed, like a door someone never really wanted to close, made me pause. Inside, there was a single sheet of notebook paper, folded 3 times, smelling faintly of baby powder and old gilt. At the top, in shaky handwriting, "From Melanie Harper, I don't know where to begin because I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't either, if I were you." I watched the court hearing replay in my head for weeks. Not just what you said, but how calm you were. You didn't yell. You didn't shame me the way I deserved. You just told the truth. That hurt more than anything, because it made me realize how much I've built my life on pretending I was the one who suffered. But I didn't. You did. And we took everything from you: money, space, your name, your story. And then we called you selfish. I have no excuse. I was scared. James was gone. I felt like I had nothing. And when Mom offered the money, I didn't ask questions. I just took it. And when I saw how people praised me for being the supportive sister, I got addicted to the attention. But I know now that being praised for someone else's pain is one of the ugliest things a person can chase. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I see it now. All of it. I started a new job. Nothing glamorous. I'm paying off the restitution in monthly payments. It will probably take me years, but I'll pay every cent. And I'll never ask you to call me sister again. But I'll always be the girl who wishes she had been brave enough to protect you instead of profit from you. Melanie. I read the letter twice, then a third time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. Just sat there, in my dorm room, surrounded by textbooks, class schedules, and a new life I'd built without needing anyone's permission. And I breathed. Because for the first time, I knew something that I didn't before. I didn't need revenge. I already had something better. Freedom. College was hard at first. I was older than most freshmen, quieter, more observant. But I found myself drawn to people who didn't ask questions about my past and didn't treat me like a project. One day, in ethics class, our professor asked, "What's the cost of truth?" Someone said trust, another said privacy. When it was my turn, I said, "Sometimes everything, but what you build after it is finally yours." I never wrote back to Melanie. Not because I hated her, not anymore, but because the version of me who would have replied didn't exist anymore. She was gone, and in her place was someone stronger, someone softer, someone who knew that survival is messy, but reclamation, that's a choice. The email came in the middle of finals week. Subject: panel invitation, financial misuse, family betrayal, and digital fundraising ethics. It was from a nonprofit that had followed my story since the podcast episode aired. They were organizing a panel at a small summit in DC and wanted me to speak, not as a victim, but as a survivor of financial abuse through family. I reread the message 4 times before I answered 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane with one small suitcase, a worn folder labeled Truth, and a speech I still wasn't sure I'd deliver. The event was in a modest hall. White walls, dim overhead lights, folding chairs filled with strangers who'd been hurt in eerily similar ways, a woman who lost her savings to a cousin's fake medical emergency, a man whose brother forged his signature on a business loan, a mother whose ex drained their child's fundraiser for gambling debts. I didn't belong to them. Not exactly. But I understood them. And when they introduced me, I walked on stage without shaking. When people hear family, they think safety. They think loyalty. But some of us grew up in families where love came with price tags, where pain was borrowed, stolen, and sold back to us as pity. I was told I should be grateful I survived cancer, that asking where the money went made me selfish. I believed that, until I realized survival means nothing if you're not allowed to own your story. I'm not here to destroy my family. I already left the ashes behind. I'm here to say, no one has the right to turn your pain into their profit. And when they do, you are allowed to walk away. Quietly, loudly, legally, publicly. However you choose, as long as you choose you. The room clapped, not loudly, but respectfully. Emotionally. People came up to me afterward. Some hugged me. Some cried. One woman handed me a folded napkin with a scribbled note. You helped me leave. Thank you. That night, I sat in the hotel lobby sipping weak coffee, staring at the city lights outside the glass window, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Hey. Harper? I turned. Melanie stood there. She looked older, tired, her eyes swollen, but soft. I didn't know you'd be here, I said. I wasn't sure I should come, she replied. I nodded. You did. A long pause. I paid the last of it, she said quietly. The restitution. I had to borrow from 2 jobs, but it's done. I waited for a request, a plea for reconciliation, but it didn't come. Instead, she looked down at the carpet and said, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to look you in the eye and say thank you. For what? For standing up. For showing me what it means to be accountable. She took a step back. I won't bother you again. She turned to leave. But before she could walk away, I said one final thing. You can be better for your daughter. That's how it ends. Melanie stopped, nodded once, and walked out into the night. I didn't watch her go. I turned back to the window, not because I was ignoring the past, but because for the first time in years, I had a future, story I owned, a life that was mine, and no one would ever take it from me again.